Panti Bliss, thanks so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Pleasure to be here.
You recently said that Panti Bliss has made you a better person. In what way?
Well, I think anybody really who doesn't necessarily fit into the sort of standard box, I think that's actually a good thing as you go through your life. It makes you appreciate other viewpoints or other angles. And I think it makes you a sort of a nicer person. So I think if I didn't have this part of me, you know, I mightn't be so nice. I might be a dick.
It's been 2 years since you delivered a speech that's really credited with changing attitudes to homosexuality in Ireland. It didn't appear to be a scheduled appearance at the National Theatre in Ireland. What were the circumstances surrounding that?
The circumstances were that at that time I had been on a television show and I was being sued for libel because I had suggested that some people were homophobic, and they took exception to that, and that was sort of a bit of a scandal. That was a scandal at the time in Ireland, and there was a show on, you know, a play on in the National Theatre, and at the end of that play, every evening, I remember someone was asked to make a speech or sing a song, you know, to respond to that play. So there had been hundreds, you know, writers, artists, musicians, thinkers, whatever. But they asked me to do it on the very last night of the play's run, and they said I could talk about whatever I wanted. And so at that time, I was in a little difficulty, and so I took the opportunity to talk about the position that I was in at that time. So the National Theatre didn't know what I was going to talk about necessarily, but they gave me the opportunity to say whatever I wanted, and I chose to speak about homophobia. 3 weeks ago, I was on the television, and I said that I believe that people who actively campaign for gay people to be treated less or treated differently are, in my gay opinion, homophobic. Now, some people who actively campaign for gay people to be treated less under the law took great exception to that characterisation.
Stephen Fry dubbed it a noble call. Others have said it was the most eloquent Irish speech in the last century. In it, you recall the time when, as Rory O'Neill, you were hit by a milk carton thrown from a passing car. Tell us the significance of that moment in your life.
I think every, you know, LGBT person experiences those moments where, you know, either something is thrown at you or metaphorically something is thrown at you. And because, you know, people are treating you badly because of a sort of an inherent facet of who you are that you can't change, it's a really difficult thing to deal with, especially when you're younger. And so when I was speaking about it, I was sort of speaking about how that sort of conflict how it affects all, I think, LGBT people, and how they often internalise it and take on those, you know, small psychic, you know, cuts all the time, and are sort of constantly second-guessing themselves, trying not to be too gay in public for fear of, you know, drawing unwanted attention. Or, you know, so it's a very complicated thing, homophobia, because people imagine generally when you say the word that what you're talking about is gay people being beaten up on Oxford Street late at night or something. But it's much subtler than that. I think homophobia expresses itself in so many tiny ways. And I think LGBT people, you know, are constantly having to adjust themselves and how they behave in public, and in order to not feel threatened or to be safe.
On that stage, you called yourself a homophobe.
Yes, because I think we all internalise it. And there's, you know, look at me, I'm a 47-year-old, you know, drag queen, I'm the gayest thing in the world. And yet there are still moments where I find myself sort of checking myself to maybe not be too gay in a certain circumstance or whatever. Now, as you get older, I think I've gotten much better at it. You know, but there certainly was times, you know, when I'd be, you know, even in my 30s, and I've been out and I have a great family and all that for a very long time. And yet I'd still, you know, if I was on the train and my friend is being super gay, I'd be a little uncomfortable, wishing he'd just tone it down a little bit, you know, and why should he? You know, I think we all have those things. And what was amazing to me, though, about it was I was speaking from my perspective as an LGBT person, but so many people identified with the sort of the general theme of sort of oppression in a sense. You know, and so many thousands of people wrote to me afterwards who were not gay people, but, you know, women or, you know, fat kids in school or, you know, people in wheelchairs or people with autism. I think everybody can identify with some kind of oppression in their lives because at some point in nearly everybody's life, you're the one on the outside. And I think that's the difficult place to be.
And I think you've spoken before about being different doesn't mean you can't be equal.
No, exactly. I mean, not everybody has to be the same in order to be treated with, you know, equally. You know, equality isn't something that diminishes as you parcel it out. It's not a finite resource. So if you treat, you know, this group of people equally, you know, and then also treat this group of people equally, it doesn't affect, you know, how the original group is being treated.
Do you think you could have achieved all that you have in terms of raising awareness if you had done so as the T-shirt and jeans wearing Rory O'Neill?
No, absolutely not. I've learned through my life that actually drag sort of amplifies my voice. And just being an entertainer gives you, a sort of a louder voice, if you know what I mean. But also, I think there's a number of things at play. For example, in that speech that we're talking about, if I had given that speech in a T-shirt and a pair of jeans, you know, would that many people have gone and watched it on Facebook or whatever, on YouTube or whatever? No, they wouldn't have. But there is something more visually appealing to see a sort of a shiny drag queen standing in front of, you know, the actors who were in the play that night, sort of downtrodden workers. It has a more of an appeal. People are attracted to shiny things, and I'm a shiny thing, you know. But also, I think once people are past the drag, you know, once you give them a few minutes to get past all of that, and they actually then listen to what you have to say, it can also underscore what you have to say. And in this case, it underscores what I have to say, because what I have to say is that you should, you know, treat everybody equally and give everybody the same sort of respect, regardless of whether or not you agree with what they're wearing or who they're loving or, you know, on any of those things. That is immaterial to you respecting them.
Okay, so you did mention this earlier, and we'll get to this now, and it became known as Pantygate.
Yes.
And you were actually threatened with legal action by certain journalists and the Christian lobby over comments you made on a quite popular television entertainment show. What did you say that caused such a stir?
Well, the thing is, it was very innocuous, my comments. I was describing generally what I thought homophobia was. And during that conversation, I did name a few very well-known journalists and a particular sort of ultra-Catholic right-wing organisation. And they took offence to that. They felt that I had characterised them as homophobes, and they sued me and our national broadcaster. And it just became a sort of a huge sort of scandal, which encompassed, you know, not only, you know, our libel laws and whether or not gay people are allowed to, you know, point out homophobia when they see it, but also about the role of the national broadcaster and censorship and all that, because the interview was taken down off the internet immediately.
Not only that, RTE, the national broadcaster, paid €85,000 in compensation.
Yes, they did. They did so, you know, because their lawyers decided it would be easier and quicker to pay some money than fight it. So yes, RTE, the national broadcaster, it paid to make it go away. I couldn't really do that. So I was sort of hung out to dry for a while. But I think especially after the speech, I sort of won in the court of public opinion. And so I didn't end up having to go to court in the very end.
There's a moment in the documentary of your life when you've gone back to your hometown of Ballinrobe for a big performance. They call it the Homecoming Queen. I thought that was fabulous. You're walking to the venue, arm in arm with your mother, and your father, the local country vet, is holding an umbrella over you to protect you from the rain. Did that feel as wonderful as it looked, that moment?
It did and it didn't. You know, I am from this very tiny, you know, town in the, you know, on the west coast of Ireland, and you know, it's your typical country town, and so I was your typical gay kid growing up, and I always felt a little bit awkward there, a little bit weird there, and I always thought that there would never be a place for me in that town, even though it's a lovely town and people are lovely, but you know. And so to be going back there then, to do this show like this, and this was, it was a week after the marriage equality referendum in Ireland. So there was just a lot of emotions tied up. And so to be that gay boy going back to that tiny town to do a show in this tiny town where they don't have a theater or anything, so they had put up a marquee in the middle of the town, in the car park of the local tire business, and then the whole town came out and, old ladies sitting on their plastic chairs and everything. It was a pretty overwhelming thing. I think for, any, gay person from a small town will sort of get how kind of odd that was for me and overwhelming.
And your 80-year-old parents were
I
laughing
know.
uproariously.
I know, but my parents are amazing. So that part of it didn't, surprise me too much. Although, I got ready in my parents' old dressing room, 40 years after I used to sit there and watch my mother getting ready to go to the local dance, So the whole thing was sort of quite overwhelming. But the whole town they'd put little rainbow flags on the doors, and, it was just so, it was really lovely.
I understand you were about 11 or 12 when you first started to recognise that you might be a little different from some of the other boys in your school. What do you remember most vividly from that time of your life?
When I got, started, going into my teens, whatever, going into the ages where these things suddenly, I started to feel odd and different than the other kids. And I think nowadays it's probably even hard for kids to understand because they know so much now. But when, in the 1970s, when I was growing up, I had no idea what gay was. And, there were no gay people on the television. So I really did not understand what was different about me, but I felt it very keenly.
Here in Australia, some Conservative politicians have railed against, just this week, an anti-bullying schools program that teaches respect for LGBT children. It's a series of 8 lessons designed just for 11 and 12-year-olds specifically, which critics say is age inappropriate, that it's too early to be sending children of that age these messages. What's your view on that?
Well, I think, first of all, kids are never fussed about, these things. For example, sometimes people are always horrified if they think of sort of me doing children's shows, which I do on occasion, but kids just see me as a clown. They have a much different view in the world. And I think it's never too early to introduce the idea to kids that not every couple is made up of a man and a woman. And kids are never freaked out about those things. They're taught to be freaked out about those things. And so I honestly don't believe it's true because kids at a very early stage start to feel their own, difference or their own sexuality. They may be too young to name it, to be able to describe it to you, but you ask any gay kid, they'll tell you when they started feeling different or weird, and they'll also tell you when they started being bullied about it. So,
were you bullied about it?
Yes, yeah, well, not, I'm going to say all gay, but like most gay kids, other kids sensed the difference in me and would say things and, make me feel very awkward. Now, I was lucky. I never really got into any bad trouble, but I know so many other LGBT people who did. So, I was lucky in that sense. But it is never too early. What are people afraid of? I think there's this weird idea that somehow you're going to turn kids gay, as if that were possible. I mean, look at me. I have come from a straight family with straight parents and straight friends and straight neighbors, and it's the straightest town and the straightest country in this whole world, and I still turned out to be gay. I mean, this is definitely innate. So the choices are, do you, sort of condemn that kid to struggle against it and be bullied about it, and all of those things that we've learned over the years happen to young LGBTI people, or do you sort of cut that off at the pass and encourage kids to accept all of the kids for who they are?
Let's talk about the vote in Ireland.
Yes.
We watched the images of the No campaign, posters that said 2 men can't replace a mother's love. Were you personally hurt by some of the tactics of the No lobby?
I think it was a very difficult time in general to be LGBT in Ireland in the 6 months leading up to the referendum. I mean, obviously there was wonderful things about it, but it was, to every day there was only one conversation in town, this constant debate for 6 months. And during that debate, it was suddenly okay for people to say the most heinous things about you and, you know, all of your friends, to sort of be walking down streets where these posters are hanging off every lamppost saying that you're some sort of threat to children, or you know, people going on television and saying that you're literally a threat to the very fabric of society, and that somehow giving you, you know, full and equal citizenship will have dire consequences. And to constantly be hearing that over a 6-month period, it becomes depressing and difficult. And I think especially for young gay people, I think it was very difficult to be hearing that all the time. And also simply because, you know, sometimes the most odious things were said, but they had to be given, you know, be aired, because that's how the process works. And that was very difficult, I think. And also, you know, I know that whether you want to do it we had to do it by referendum because of the vagaries of our constitution.
Yes, ours would not be a referendum.
Yes.
Ours is a plebiscite.
Yes, but your plebiscite would sort of give a lot of strength, right, to whatever the answer would be. Well, so we had to do by referendum, and I would never recommend that to any country because it's difficult. It's a risky strategy, because if you lose, you might have to wait another generation to try again. And of course, I don't think that the majority should get to vote on the rights of minorities. However, once you do it by referendum, it's a massive undertaking. Everybody needs to get involved. But at the end of it, it's actually a very powerful way to do it. Partly because afterwards nobody can carp about the result. They can't say, oh, it was brought in by a political elite. Well, no, we all discussed it and we all got together and we all voted for it. But also because of that very reason, the 6 months of airing out every bit of dirty laundry, then everybody getting together and everybody voting, the result is incredibly powerful. It's a done deal. And it's a done deal that we all decided on. And one of the most remarkable things to me is, if you had asked me the day before the referendum, I would have said, oh, well, tomorrow, if we get the result we want, it'll be a wonderful day, and from then on, LGBT people will be able to get married as well. And I thought that was it. But actually, it was much more than that. I think because we did it by referendum, there was a real change in atmosphere in the country about how we treat gay people and how we sort of cherish or don't cherish them. We'd had that conversation, we'd voted on it, and you could immediately see that, and you see more gay people holding hands in public. You see them acting just like other, you know, any ordinary straight couple sitting together in a restaurant or whatever. And that is because the gay community suddenly feel much more confident, much more secure in their position in society.
As part of a significant figure for the Yes campaign, you actually went door to door.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
Canvassing for something like that is a funny one, because on one level it's humiliating. I mean, you are going door to door, knocking on strangers' doors, you know, while they're trying to have their dinner after their day's work, and you're essentially asking them to approve of you, you know, to vote, to give you full and equal citizenship. And there's something a little humiliating about that. You know, because what other group has that ever been expected of? You know, I can't think of another one. But then, on the other hand, it can be really a wonderful experience. First of all, you meet some incredible people, and they will bust all of your sort of, you know, preconceived notions about how somebody might vote on marriage equality. You know, lots of older people are strong yes voters because they've decided after a lifetime, let people be happy. And also it's very inspiring too, because sometimes maybe you'll turn up at some housing estate at 7 p.m. after a long day, you know, and you're waiting for the group of people to turn up to see who's going to turn up. We're all going to go canvass this housing estate. And then maybe 80% of them are not LGBT people at all. They're just people who sort of passionately believe in fairness for, you know, their gay brother or their, you know, lesbian auntie or their trans neighbor or co-worker or whatever. And that kind of thing can be sort of super inspiring and lovely.
There is still a powerful minority, you'd be aware, who oppose same-sex marriage in this country.
Yeah.
Our national vote is still more than a year away. But the most vocal critic, a government politician, argues that marriage has been reserved as a sacred bond between a man and a woman across times, across cultures and across very different religious beliefs. It's the very foundation of the family, and the family is the basic unit of society. What's your response to that?
Well, I'd agree with almost all of that. Well, you know, marriage, there's a confusion in what he said there immediately between civil marriage and religious marriage. no one is asking for a religious marriage. That's up to each individual church, and they're happy to do that. We're talking about civil marriage. And LGBT people are supposedly full and equal members of this society, and they pay the same taxes, and they, they have all the same responsibilities, so they should be given all of the same rights. And one of those is also access to civil marriage. And I agree that in our society, the family is the basis of the society. But gay people are families too. And sometimes I often think, they bring up this spectre of, gay people having children, how awful that must be, without ever going to meet or talk to any of these, families. Gay families are families too. Families are, they appear in lots of different ways. Life is messy and weird and wonderful and amazing. And there are plenty of gay families out there. So the question then is, so you have children raised by gay couples. So do you want to, tell those kids that you cherish them just as much and give them the strength of a family that's recognized under the law? Or do you want to sort of say to those kids, actually, no, you're not going to get the same protections as the kids who are over here who are born into the kind of family that I approve of? People make their own families. The job of government is to protect those families, not to tell those families which ones it approves of more than others.
Panti Bliss, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to Lateline.
Not at all. Thank you.